Welcome back. I'm actually particularly excited about the video today. And that doesn't happen often, or at least when it does, it ends up being a better video, more exciting. So the topic for today is Blue Note on 45 RPM. Now, I'm not talking about Music Matters, I'm not talking about reissues, I'm talking about original Blue Note 45s. Here's the thing, no one is paying attention to Blue Note 45s right now. And I don't want to say I want to change that because it leaves the space open for me, but I've been a passionate fan of Blue Note on 45 RPM singles since I started collecting, and it just boggles my mind. I don't know why people, first of all, don't appreciate Blue Note 45s when you consider how big of an audience there is for Blue Note on sort of standard 33 RPM, whether in 12-inch or whether in 10-inch. But also this idea that generally speaking, jazz on 45 RPM is like completely ignored. And the really funny thing about that is that is really a couple things. One is that in so many cases with jazz on 45 RPM, you actually have fantastic covers, sometimes that are completely different than the actual full 12-inch release or 10-inch release, especially when it comes to Bethlehem, when it comes to Savoy. There's just, it's a completely different world in terms of covers. But then in terms of the music, and actually getting back to Blue Note, because Blue Note never had covers for the US editions of their 45 RPM stuff until like the late 60s. The music is fantastic. You still have the same addresses that people get excited about with Blue Note. You have the Lexington, and you have like, the West 63rd, and you have all that stuff. You also have RVG stamps. You have the etched RVG in the runoff. Like all of the hallmarks that everybody likes to see in terms of Blue Note is there with 45 RPM, and yet no one seems interested in getting it. And you know what? Let's leave all of that aside. The main reason why I like collecting 45 RPM on Blue Note is because the stuff that they released, like there are so many instances of it never actually being released on a 12-inch full-length album. And like that to me is absolutely insane. This idea that there's actually new music that Blue Note didn't put out on an album that you can only get in its original form on 45 RPM, and no one seems to care about it. And I'm not talking about just like artists that nobody cares about. I'm talking about like Sonny Clark, Benny Green, Ike Quebec. Like there are full albums on 45 RPM that never made it originally to 12-inch. And so I've been collecting Blue Note on 45 RPM since I first started collecting records, okay? Like I would go into stores, and even early on, like, because we're only talking about like 12 years ago or so. Like we're not talking, like, it's not like I've been collecting for like 30 years or something. But even when I started collecting, I would go into stores, not be able to afford or at least justify spending the money for a Blue Note record, and yet I could go over to the 45 section and I would flip through and I'd be able to get like Hank Mobley, Sonny Clark, Freddie Hubbard on 45 RPM for like $3 or $4 for a single. And it's crazy to me that people that are interested in jazz and are interested in Blue Note, interested in these musicians, don't care about finding anything on 45 RPM. And so I wanted to make a video about a couple of things. One, obviously I wanted to share my passion for this medium. I want to talk a little bit about some of the best stuff, I suppose, that you can find on 45 RPM, like the stuff that like again, we're talking about even the stuff that is available on 12-inch that then had singles that sort of spun off it, right? So like it would be, a couple tracks off of like Sonny's Crib or whatever would be put out on single. I want to cover some of the highlights, I suppose, of what you can get on 45 RPM. But then I really want to focus in on the stuff that you can't get on any album because it wasn't released on a full-length album. And so the only way to hear the stuff is if you find, and again, in its original form. Actually, some of the stuff I don't think has ever been released again, and it's only available in this format. Other times, what you'll find is the stuff was put out on 45 RPM, never made a full album, but then like it was put on like some sort of Japanese reissue in the 80s, okay? And that was like the first time you could hear it. So I want to cover all of those things, right? The stuff that you know, in its original format, you can only listen to on 45 RPM, just some of the best stuff on it. And there's just a lot of unique stuff too. I mean, you have like vocal stuff that you would not have expected. Like, did you know that Horace Silver put out some singles on Blue Note with a vocalist? Did you know Jimmy Smith did that? There's just some really interesting stuff, including for musicians that never actually put out an album whatsoever as a leader, that you can get on 45 RPM. And again, I just think it's criminally underappreciated, and I'm a huge fan. I have about 110 or so. I think it's about 110 Blue Note 45s. I'm not done with them. There's like still some things that I'm looking for, and I always keep an eye out, and I'm you know, I don't want to say I'm always buying, but you know, even recently, even just like, in fact, right now, I'm actually still waiting on a 45 to arrive in the mail. So anyway, that's the topic for today. I actually think that this is uncharted territory. I haven't heard others talk about this, and so I hope you share my excitement about this topic. All right, so this is how we're going to do it. First of all, I want to mention there is a fantastic website, and this is not limited to Blue Note 45s. It is Jazz Disco. If you look up Jazz Disco, disco like the music, what you will find is a full album and session index for essentially every jazz album, or at least that's their intent. So what you will find there is a list of the albums, either by artist, by label, what have you. You'll find out when the session was recorded, what tracks were on it, who was on the album, all of those types of things, and that is a great way to reference this this music. And so, in fact, that's actually how I've done a lot of my research over the years, is because they've done such a fantastic job. Between them and London Jazz Collector, who I've contributed towards in terms of like you know, providing some knowledge that they've now listed on their site, etc. Anyway, some great resources. I'll drop links in the description. What I'm going to do though is I am going to show a couple of these 45s. I'm going to attempt to insert them right up here, just so you can get a better look, because otherwise it's like me reaching out into the camera and showing them to you. You're not going to see it anyway. So I'll have them up here for reference, but I have them here as props so that I can look at them. So what I want to do to first cover, and I'm going to cover you know, a bunch of stuff up front, and then we'll get into that unreleased stuff, but I want to cover a couple of highlights first. So the first one I just dropped. I literally just dropped it. Let me grab it right now. I seriously just did that, but it's fine. It's a 45 and it's carpet. Come on. So, all right. So, what we have here is 1634. Okay. So when it comes to 45s on Blue Note, you could kind of consider 1600 series, 1700 series, 1800, and then 1900 series. I think generally speaking, there might be like something for the BNLA series, but anyway, generally speaking, those are the series that you want to be concerned with. And really the earliest, the one that I just dropped, the earliest Blue Note in terms of when the session was recorded is this right here. And so what this record is on one side, it is Charlie Christian with Ed Hall. And so you'd say Charlie Christian with Ed Hall, you know, probably not on 12-inch, and you'd be right. And that's actually from 1941. On the other side is Ike Quebec's Blue Harlem, and that is from 1944. Has Tiny Grimes. Can I see it in the dark? Oh my goodness, it's blurred. Milt Hinton, J.C. Hurd. Yeah, so this is his earliest in terms of a 45, and one of the earliest 45s that they put out, just generally speaking, as a Blue Note 45. So particularly interesting one in terms of when it was released. You've got the Lexington Avenue address on here, and you also have an etched RVG that is on this 45 as well. So I'm a huge fan just for the item, right? Just this idea that this is like the earliest. And again, you have Ike Quebec. Incidentally, Ike Quebec was recording for Blue Note as early as the 78 RPM era, and actually put out a box set. So get this, there's 78 RPM box sets for Blue Note that pre-existed all of this stuff, right? And I have 3 or 4 of them. I think there's like, is there 4 total or is there 5 total? Anyway, I'm only missing one. That'll be a topic for another video, I'm sure. But anyway, Ike Quebec released a ton of stuff early on, And his first appearance on Blue Note 45 was with, again, Blue Harlem in 1944. All right, the next one that I want to cover is Horace Silver and the Jazz Messengers. So the 12-inch record that this particular 45 is from is catalog number 1518. It is that Horace Silver cover where it's like a blue tinge. There's two of them, but this is the one with the blue tinge, and he's kind of like motioning with his hands, almost like he's like conducting others or something, or counting them in. Great cover. And anyway, the catalog number for this 45 is 1631. It is one of the earliest because 1626, I want to say, is the very earliest 45. Anyway, who you have on this particular 45 is Kenny Dorham, Hank Mobley, Horace Silver, obviously, Doug Watkins, and Art Blakey. I mean, come on, like fantastic musicians on this 45. The tracks that we have here, Room 608. And then we also have, what do we have? Creepin' In on this 45. So also etched RVG, obviously Lexington Address because they were still there. So again, all of the hallmarks of what the original album would have, obviously without, actually maybe not obviously without Plastilite. So interestingly, if Plastilite and the ear in the runoff is something that kind of runs throughout so many of these early Blue Notes when it comes to 10-inch as well as 12-inch, they are not present on any 45. So what that would mean to me is, I guess, one of two things. They didn't use Plastilite, or they couldn't fit the ear in the runoff on these 45s, and I'm actually not sure which it is. But again, you have the etched RVG. You even have the 9M. You know how like 9M, maybe people don't know. So on a lot of early Blue Notes, they will etch 9M, and that was something that Plastilite, I think Plastilite used. And so if the 9M is here, you'd think it might have been Plastilite who actually pressed this and just didn't put the ear in it. These are all unanswered questions that I don't think anybody has solved. But in any event, another one of the earliest, fantastic lineup. Fantastic music, and here it is on 45. All right, so I've covered some of the particulars. I'm going to do a couple of like rapid fire things that I'm sort of flipping through here to show you in terms of what I think are some of the highlights, some of the exciting things I suppose that you can get on Blue Note 45. And then as soon as I'm done, we will jump right into the stuff that you can't get otherwise on 12-inch 33 RPM. And so that is the stuff I think that would be particularly interesting, because if you're like me and you are interested in maybe not collecting them all, right? Because you can't get them. I mean, I guess you could get them all. But if you're interested in finding the new music that you can't otherwise get on full albums, then that is the stuff that you might want to pay even more attention to, right? Because it's exciting to hear some of this stuff. So a couple of things, and again, I'm going to throw them up here so that you can see them. What we have here is Johnny Griffin from Introducing Johnny Griffin, which is title 1533 in its 12-inch format. This 16 RPM is titled 1640. But this is a new tenor star from Chicago, Johnny Griffin. You have The Boy Next Door. You have Nice and Easy. On this record, you have Wynton Kelly, Curly Russell, and somebody who is just listed as Maximilian. That's interesting, right? Because they would always do some of these cryptic things. My guess is that that's Max Roach. And if I was a little bit more knowledgeable about that album, then I would be able to tell you for certain. So anyway, I'll put some text below this if my suspicion is correct. But anyway, super interesting that you can get that on 45 RPM for a couple of bucks when you consider that album costs like thousands of dollars. All right, next one, you have Clifford Brown, Easy Living, Gigi Grice, Charlie Rouse, John Lewis, Percy Heath, and Art Blakey again. This would actually be on the Clifford Brown Memorial album, which was titled 1526, catalog number 1526. Here it is catalog number 1648, recorded in 1953. Let me press along here and find some other good things. So here we have Sonny Rollins. This is from Volume 1, 1542. I think it's that blue and yellow cover, right, from the 1500 series. The 45 catalog number is 1669. This is Decision, Part 1 and 2. So some of these 45 RPMs you'd have, they couldn't fit the whole song on one side. Don't get me wrong, I know that's annoying. I know that you have to flip it, but like you just kind of have to like get with the program here on these 45 RPMs. So you have Donald Byrd, Wynton Kelly, Gene Ramey, and Max Roach on this one from December 1956. Fantastic. Let me see. Let me see what you got. More Sonny Rollins. Oh, also from Volume 1. This is 1670. So a lot of this stuff, they wouldn't just do one single, they would do like multiple singles. Some of them they do like 3 or 4 singles from the same album. By the way, which means that if you collect all of the 45s from a particular album, you might actually be able to form the entire album for a fraction of the cost because you're getting it on 45 RPM. So again, why would you, I mean, I don't want to say why would you spend like thousands of dollars on something if you can get it on 45 RPM, because I understand the limitations of this format, but like still, come on. All right, so this one we have is Hank Mobley. This is from Hank Mobley and his All-Stars, catalog number 1544 on 12-inch. Here it is catalog number 1671. Recorded in January of 1957. The tracks are Lower Stratosphere, and then you've got Reunion. And the lineup is Milt Jackson, Horace Silver, Doug Watkins, and Art Blakey, again, with Hank Mobley. Just a couple of more, and then we'll kind of shift gears here. And like, there's so many highlights. I mean, what, like, come on. Okay, so how about this? Did you know that you can get Blue Train on 45 RPM? This is John Coltrane's Blue Train, the title track that you can get on 45 RPM. Now they split it, part 1, part 2, right? So you have to flip it. But, I mean, come on, Lee Morgan, Curtis Fuller, Kenny Drew, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones on 45 RPM. I've owned a few copies of this. I actually think I still have a duplicate copy of this because every time I found it, and it would be like $3 or $4, I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I have to get it. It's insane to me that that people weren't picking this stuff up. Or maybe you think I'm insane. I don't know. This next one is Louis Smith. Probably Lewis Smith, huh? Lewis Smith, this is from Here Comes Lewis Smith, the 12-inch catalog number 1584. Here it is 1700 even. This is Brill's Blues, part 1 and 2. So they split the track. The lineup here, so you have Lewis Smith, you have Buckshot LaFunk, which I believe was a pseudonym for Cannonball Adderley. Then you have Duke Jordan, Doug Watkins, and Art Taylor. So obviously a classic one there. Let me pull just a couple more. Notice I'm not pulling all the Jimmy Smith stuff. Jimmy Smith had a ton of these. So also from, this is also from Blue Train, but is not the title track. You can get Moment's Notice, part 1 and 2, same lineup that I covered before, right here. And the 45 RPM catalog number is 1718. Almost lost that one out of the sleeve. Oh, and it looks like I have a couple of those in here. All right, let me just do one more and then we're going to shift gears. This is a good segue. Sonny Clark. So come on. You cannot get Sonny Clark on Blue Note for any reasonable price in its original form unless it's on 45 RPM. And by the way, there's stuff that was never released on 12-inch that you can get on 45 RPM that you can't get elsewhere. I mean, come on. So anyway, this particular one is from 2 different albums, which is quite unusual. So what they did was they have the track Speak Low, which is credited here to John Coltrane and Sonny Clark from catalog number 1576, which is Sonny's crib. But then the other thing that they have here is Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, which is from a completely different album. It's from the Sonny Clark Trio, catalog number 1579. And that one has Clark with Paul Chambers and Philly Joe Jones. So they actually took a single from 2 different Sonny Clark albums, put them onto one 45 RPM, and this is that. So I personally think, I mean, here's the thing. Like, you've got Art Taylor, you've got Lou Donaldson in here, you've got, Horace Silver and Art Blakey, and you have the Messengers, you have Curtis Fuller, like you have everybody. There's even, get this, there's even a Julius Watkins 45 RPM that they only released on 10-inch Blue Note. So it never got a 33 RPM 12-inch release. And you can get it on 45 RPM. So, I mean, here's the thing. I think you probably feel some of my simultaneously passion, but as well as frustration. And it's because I love collecting this stuff, and I actually love spinning it too, because it sounds great. Some of this stuff, I mean, maybe my full-length album just doesn't sound great, right? Or maybe I don't even own it because I can't afford it. So I personally think 45 RPM Blue Note is a great way to hear the music. And these are some of the sort of highlights, I suppose, of all the 45s that I've collected. But for the next part of this video, what I want to focus on is the sessions that you cannot get on in their original form because they were not put out on 12-inch 33 RPM releases. So essentially the unreleased stuff that only was released later in like the 80s or even never. So that's what we're about to get into. All right, so the first one I'm going to cover, and actually the first several I'm going to cover, are vocalists that were featured on Blue Note 45 that again never made it to an album. Obviously, there's Sheila Jordan. There's the Sheila Jordan title that was put out on Blue Note. There's the Dodo Green title that was put out on Blue Note, and actually Dodo Green has some 45s. But I'm talking about different stuff. Again, this is stuff that on 45 didn't make it to a full release. And the first one, and I'm going to continue to show you close-ups right up here just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. This first one is by Leon Eason. Leon Eason was a vocalist as well as a trumpet player, not unlike Louis Armstrong, both in terms of, well, those two things, but also in terms of style. This title is catalog number 1745. On one side, it's I'm in the Mood for Love, and on the other, it is Lazy River. The lineup here is Leon Eason, Dottie Dudley on organ, John Simmons on bass, and Ronnie Cole on drums. And so if I'm looking at this thing, it's got the 47 West 63rd. Let me see, RVG stamp is in the runoff here. So yeah, again, just a title that was put out on 45, never made it to a full release. Incidentally, there are actually two others that were recorded and never put out on 45. So that's even one further step removed away from like reality, it becoming something that people can hear. I think that those tracks exist somewhere, but anyway, those two catalog numbers, I want to say are 1746 and 1747, which are the two that would have followed this. But again, only one made it out onto 45. All right, these next few I think are actually pretty fun, and the reason why is because it features Bill Henderson alongside Blue Note musicians. So it would be, the Blue Note band, but then Bill Henderson came in and sang some of their work with them, and they put it out on 45. So the first one is, let's see, so Bill Henderson, this is from 1958, catalog number 1728. And this is Bill Henderson Sings with the Jimmy Smith Trio. So you've got Jimmy Smith, Ray Crawford on guitar, and then Don Bailey on drums, and they sing "Ain't That Love" on one side, and on the other it's "Willow Weep for Me." So that was one of several that he did with Jimmy Smith. This next one, Bill Henderson Sings. So this is catalog number 1727. So these are sequential. And there's a lot of damage on this thing, but also Ray Crawford and Don Bailey on drums. They sing "Angel Eyes," as well as "Ain't No Use." So anyway, those are the two, I believe the only two that Bill Henderson put out singing with the Jimmy Smith Trio. There's actually one other that Bill Henderson was on, and it is with Horace Silver's group. This is actually the one that I have in transit, so I can't show you what it looks like, but it's very interesting to me because Horace Silver had a Senor Blues single that he did, which was just his instrumental group, and they did Senor Blues. But then also, Bill Henderson came in and sang with them. So they recorded essentially the single twice, or the track twice, once with Bill Henderson, and then once just instrumental, which is the version that made it on the actual album. So don't have that one to show you just yet, but I've got it in transit. All right, now we're really getting into some of the fun stuff. So you may recall one of the first 45s that I showed you had I Quebec on one side. It was recorded in 1944. Well, I Quebec had a number of singles that were put out that actually weren't like old content that they pulled forward in order to release on 45. It was new content. It just never made a full album. So a couple of those so first of all, this is I Quebec. Let's see, 1959, catalog number 1748, also 1749, is from the exact same session. Both have Skeeter Best on guitar, Edwin Swanston on organ, Sonny Wellesley on bass and Les Jenkins on drums. They record Blue Monday, Dear John, Blue Friday, and the Buzzard Lope. So these two titles are sort of companion titles. They probably would have been, I suppose they needed some additional content, but they could have made an album out of this. As it is, the only way to hear this stuff, these two titles, is to, actually there's two ways to hear it. One is to buy the complete 45 sessions, which is an Ike Quebec release that came out, I want to say in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. And then the other is like a compilation called From Hackensack to Englewood Cliffs. And the reason why they called it that is because this session was the very last recording session at the Hackensack studio of Rudy Van Gelders. I believe that is accurate. I think it is absolutely the last one. I know that there's another album that gets the designation in terms of it being the last recorded and released. This supposedly was the last session at Hackensack, and it was only ever released on 45 RPM. So those are two. The next one I think is even more exciting, and the reason why is because there's three of them that are all from the same session, and there actually would have been a fourth. And if that fourth one had been released, all four of these would make up a complete album in terms of timing and everything. So who we have on this, in addition to Ike Quebec, is Lord Bentley, Milt Hinton, and J.C. Hurd. The only way to hear these three is to actually buy the previously mentioned complete 45 sessions of Ike Quebec. It's the only way you're going to hear it, unless you can hear it, unless you want to collect these, as I have done. But this is all from 1960, catalog number 1802, 1803, and 1804, and again, never released. So this is 3/4 of a full Blue Note album by Ike Quebec that was never put out. And I just think that that's really exciting that you can actually hear that stuff in this format. The last Ike Quebec title that I wanted to reference, catalog number 1840, this is from 1962. The lineup is Earl Van Dyke, Willie Jones, and Wilbert Hogan on this title. This is also included on the complete 45 sessions. There was also two other 45s that were recorded but never actually pressed and released. And those catalog numbers are 1839 and 1841. So there would have been additional content associated with this as well that theoretically could have been an album, but instead the only way that we have to hear this is either right here or in some of these later compilations. All right, now we get into some of the Sonny Clark territory. Initially with him as a supporting musician, and the album, or really the well, actually you could say the album, because this is by Benny Green. They later named the album that these 45 sessions were recorded for that actually never ended up getting an official release date and was never put out, and it's called Minor Revelation. So the tracks that we have on here are On the Street Where You Live. You've got Bye Bye Blackbird, Ain't Nothing But the Blues, Encore, Minor Revelation, which is what was named for, and Can't We Be Friends. And the lineup here includes Eddie Williams, Sonny Clark, Paul Chambers, and Jerry Siegel. So Minor Revelation was not released in LP format until 1980 in Japan, and it has never had a US release. Could be a great candidate for Tone Poet depending on the condition of the original master, simply because there's so few opportunities that anybody has had to hear this unknown album. And Benny Green had some great stuff for Blue Note. This is obviously a stellar cast of supporting musicians. This is great music, all from 1958, such a classic period. And so it's really frustrating that it wasn't put out and that it's so difficult to hear. But catalog number 1732, 1733, and 1734, in case you want to look out for these or to sort of watch them on Discogs and keep an eye out. All right, so the last thing that, the last couple that I'm going to reference are actually from the same session, and this is by Sonny Clark. There's two of them here. There was planned to be a third. The third was recorded, but it was never released. So this is 2 of 3 anyway. And this material actually was released later in Japan only, and on a album called Art of the Trio. So it was a compilation of some singles that Sonny Clark had been on, I think some had been released and maybe some hadn't, but anyway, it was compiled there for that Japanese release. This has also never had a US release, could be a great candidate in the future. This is Sonny Clark in trio format with Jimmy Merritt and Wesley Landers on drums. So you've got I Can't Give You Anything But Love. What else do we have here? The Breeze and I, Black Velvet, and Black Velvet again, which means it must be a part 1 and part 2, even though it doesn't say that. Typically they say part 1, part 2. This one doesn't. So anyway, 1958, Sonny Clark Trio. I mean, come on. No one can afford Sonny Clark Trio stuff from the late 50s on Blue Note, except on 45 RPM format. So unfortunately that, it's unfortunate that only 2 of the 3 exist. It's really actually really interesting because that missing catalog number is in between these. So this is 1729, 1730 is what's missing, and 1731 is here. 1730, I haven't actually seen anybody confirm that it doesn't exist. I've just never seen it. It's not on Discogs. It is not, there's no record of it's ever selling on PopPsych. And I've only just seen reference to it on jazzdisco.org, that website that I mentioned previously. So it would be really interesting if that one ever surfaced and maybe they just only made a few copies or something. But as far as I know, it doesn't exist. And I've been trying to make a point of collecting all of these unreleased sessions for quite some time. So those are some of the highlights, those initial highlights that I shared with you up front. And then for these unreleased sessions, which I have almost all of them, there's a couple of other sort of like Easter egg types of things in Blue Note 45s. There are examples of where the single is actually a different take than the one that was originally put out on the album. And I haven't fully wrapped my head around that. I need to do the research to look at like track duration and things like that to try to figure out, like where might they have used a different take, because I mean, not to say that I want like every single take of every Jimmy Smith tune, but like if there was a different take of Blue Train on the single versus the album, then I kind of want to hear it, right? So I'm not fully done with this rabbit hole, and maybe at some point in the future after I do some of that research, I will report back so that you know. But anyway, these are some of the highlights and some of the weird ones and sort of interesting things out of the 110 or so Blue Note 45s that I own. Hopefully this at least, I don't know, sparked a little bit of wonder in your mind. Maybe previously you weren't as conscious of some of the great stuff that's in the 45 RPM discography for Blue Note, and now that'll sort of prompt you to keep an eye out or to check the Jazz 45 section at your local store to the extent that there is one. Because as I said up front, I think that that Jazz on 45 RPM single is sort of just not nearly as much appreciated as other genres. And I've always found that interesting, but again, it's also probably made me focus in a little bit more on collecting them because they've been so available for so many years. So thank you very much for watching. Please hit subscribe. Let me know what you think about in the comments. I will see you next time.